know what? He's right. I don't have time for this. What's up, ladies and lads? My name is Marcus Lapp with the Indie Music Lab, and welcome to episode 4 of Indie Song Remakes, where we take some of the best indie songs out there, recreate them, and hopefully learn a few things in the process that we can then apply to our own songs and productions. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Young the Giant's song, Cough Syrup. Alright, let's dive in. As always, the musical concepts stay the same no matter which DAW you're using, so use whatever you got and follow along. Let's get started. Now, if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to share what I think are 2 things that this song does really well, and then 1 thing that I think is kind of meh. It's a new twist that I'm experimenting with for this series, so stick around for that. Alright, so first off, I'm just going to go ahead and play you a little bit of the finished product, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty details of how I recreated this song. Now that you have a feel of what we're working with, let's go ahead and dive into the individual tracks, starting with the guitars. So I've got this lead guitar doing this thing. Okay, so here's what we're doing. So this song is in the key of D, and so we're alternating between, at least to start, between the G string and the D string. And this D string is just ringing open because it's in the key of D, so it works. So, but then I'm starting up here on the note D, but it's on the G string, which is this note right here. So it goes, that's how it starts, just alternating between these 2 strings, and then it just goes down on the G string. And then I go from here to the A string, just open. So that's how you get that kind of alternating guitar picking sound. Then I just processed it with this guitar tool rack from Waves. I just started with a clean preset and then added a little bit of overdrive to warm up the tone just a little bit. So here's without it, and here's with it. Now let's head over to Spotify, and you're gonna need headphones or earbuds or studio monitors to be able to hear this, but notice how the clean guitar is being played on the left side, and then the reverb for that guitar is on the right side, so you get this really nice wide sound with the dry signal on the left and the reverb signal on the right. Let's have a listen to that. Now, I think there's a better way to get this sound than just using a plain reverb, and the reason for that is because if you listen to the timing, it sounds like the timing of a slap delay with a bunch of reverb on the slap delay. So that's what I heard, and I ran with that, and it sounded exactly what I was hoping it would sound like. So I've got a slap delay set up here on this effects channel, also known as a return track in some DAWs. So I just open up my delay plugin. It's just set to a tape slapback. And then here's where you get that really reverb sound. I threw a plate reverb on this at about just under 4 seconds, but the mix knob is all the way up at about 75%. So it's really drenching that slap delay sound. And then that's how you get this sound on the right side. And that's it. It sounds amazing. Now let's focus on the second guitar that comes in. It has this little oscillation effect on it right before the verse hits. It's right here. To get this sound, all I did was I used a different instance of guitar tool rack, just started with a different preset, basically a clean preset with some effects on it. And then I just added this kickstart plugin, which is basically just a sidechain, and that gave it that pumping effect that we're looking for. So now let's bring in the bass guitar, and I just did a very simple, straight up 8th note bass line for this. Let's have a listen to that. So this bass line is very simple. So we're just starting on the D, which is the 1, and then we're going down to the 5, down to the 4, and back up to the 5. It's that simple. And then as far as the effects on this bass, I just ran with a mono guitar amp. This is also from Waves. It's the same thing, except it's just a mono simplified version. and I just scrolled through some presets until I found a bass sound that I thought sounded good, and I rolled with it. Now let's take a look at the drums. So the kick is just a 4 on the floor. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the tom is on 2 and. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and. And then the snare hits on the 4. So if we do the toms and the snares, it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So for these drums, I'm using Addictive Drums, which is an amazing piece of software. I just scrolled through their presets, and I think I adjusted like the overhead in the room, but I started with a sound that was close and then adjusted it to taste from there. And now, one thing that really makes this drum sound pop and sound so good is this doozy of a plugin right here, the RC20. It's an incredible plugin. Really brings in a lot of that retro tube saturation and a bunch of other things that you can add in as well, like vinyl and whatnot. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to play it without the RC20, and then I'll play it with. So this is without it, and here's with it. Just warms it up, gives it that saturated kind of sound. Love it. Now, one more thing before we dive into the vocals is let's look at this cello that you can hear right off the bat in the intro. So it starts off with that guitar, and then the cello swells in right here. Simple as that. Okay, now let's check out the vocals. Now, I'm not really hearing any doubles in the first verse and chorus, which is what we're covering today. Even if there is, they're very, very way in the back. You can hardly hear them if they are there, so I'm not even going to worry about that. So we're just working with one lead vocal today. So here's the vocal with everything else that we've got so far. Life's too short to even care at all. So the first thing I did was apply some tuning to this vocal, and that was by adding a little bit of Melodyne. Not auto-tune, because this song is very obviously, you do not want that obvious robotic auto-tune effect at all. And so I just did a little bit of Melodyne to just make sure that it's in tune, but it doesn't have any of that artificial auto-tune kind of sound, which would not sound great for this song. By the way, if you need some help to tune your vocals using Melodyne, I did make a video specifically talking about that, so you can find that in the description below if you want to check that out. So the next thing I did with this vocal was I sent it through the JJP vocals from Waves, which if you've watched any of my other remakes, you would know I use this plugin all the time, especially when I want a quick and good sounding vocal, and just slap it on there and it sounds good. It's got everything you need to get you started with EQ and compression built into one. It's an all-encompassing plugin. So I started with that. Then I added some RC20 to the vocals as well, but it didn't use hardly any of the other knobs. I just used one knob, the distortion knob. I just wanted a little bit of tube saturation for this vocal to give it a little bit more of that warm sound. But then what that did was make it a little bit too warm to where the vocals weren't popping out in the mix quite enough. So then to bring back a little bit of those high frequencies again, I threw on a little bit of this Revival plugin from Steven Slate. And I just turned the shimmer knob up just ever so slightly to give it a little bit more of that high, and so I can pop out in the mix a little bit better. You can do stuff like this with, just boosting the highs of an EQ. You don't have to use these things. It's just more convenient for me to just do a one knob instead of having to adjust an EQ. And it sounds a little bit better, obviously, but nothing to write home about if you're just adjusting the highs ever so slightly. And then with the sends here, and I've got all these effects channels set up here with the plate reverb, quarter note delay, the slap delay reverb that we used on the guitar at the onset of this video, and then just a plain old slap delay. So to start with, I'm sending it to a plate reverb, just a little bit of quarter note delay, and then a little bit to that dry slap delay. So now I'm going to turn off all these plugins and all these sends, and I'm going to just turn them on one by one so you can hear the effect and how it changes the sound of the vocal. So we'll start right where the verse comes in. Life's too short to even care at all. I'm losing my mind, losing my mind, losing control. These fishes in the sea that are staring at me. A wet world aches for a beat of a drum. If I could find. So that's it for the vocal. Now before we move on to the chorus here, notice how I automated that quarter note delay on the lead vocal. So you barely can hear the delay in the verse, but then when the chorus hits, you can really hear it. So I just went here to my quarter note delay send, where I'm sending my lead vocal to this track right here, and right click, edit automation, and then we have that right here. So it starts here, and then right when this chorus comes in, I boosted it so you can really hear it. So you can hardly hear it now, but now if you listen. See what I mean? And I did this because this is exactly what I heard in the original. So let's listen to the original on Spotify. Alright, now let's hop into the chorus where two new big ass guitars are introduced. Let's have a listen. If I could find a way to see this shade, I'd run away. So as you can hear, you've got a stereo guitar sound with two different takes. And I think what I'm hearing is the left take is playing lower on the neck, playing power chords, and then the right guitar is playing higher up on the neck to offset, so they're not playing the exact same thing. So here's the left guitar. So this is just basic power chords here, starting on the 6, which would be the B minor. So it's run away to see this straight, I'd run away. Down to the 5, do some 3 to the 4. I could have 6 by now. Back down to the 5. I waited for this cough syrup to the 3 to come down, back to the 5. And that's it. And as far as processing, honestly, I just grabbed the stock amp plugin in Studio One. It's called Ampire. Went with one of the first presets I found, and I thought it sounded great, so I rolled with it. Now the right guitar is essentially doing the same thing. It's just an octave higher. So with those two together, so for this one as well, I just used Ampire and flipped through some presets until I found one that sounded cool, and put those two together, one on the right, one on the left. And let's add that in with everything else we got so far. If I could find a way to see this same, I'd run away to some fortune that I should have found by now. And finally, I added one last guitar part here, and it's this super reverbic guitar picking ambient kind of sound. It sounds like this. Now to get this sound is pretty straightforward, so all you need to do is basically play a high melody line and then just pick back and forth as fast as possible. So it's... and then drench that in reverb, and that's how you get that sound. And as far as the drums in the chorus, I know there's some improvisation happening there. That's just kind of something that you gotta play by ear, and you gotta improvise, and you just gotta get good at thinking like a drummer, especially if you want to get this kind of indie rock sound. Because you can't just rely on a loop that loops over and over. You can get away with that in pop often, but when you're talking about this kind of sound, you're gonna want to get good at your variations and your fills, because that's what we've got going here, especially in the second half of it. So it's just different stuff like that, and I've got the open hi-hat just doing the steady thing as well, which helps accentuate the chorus. Alright, and real quick before we hit the home stretch and wrap up this video, if you want to know more about what my production process looks like and how you can start with an idea, take it through a step-by-step process, and end up with a great sounding finished song, well, I've got a gift for you. It's called a 5-step guide for producing wow factor indie music. It's the first thing you'll see in the description below. If that sounds like your thing, go check it out, and I think you'll find it really helpful. Alright, back to the video. Now before we wrap this up, I want to mention a quick thing about automation, because if you notice, I don't know if you notice this or not, but listen to the drums, listen to the punch in the low end of the drums in the verse versus the chorus. All of a sudden, that kick punches, right? All of a sudden it's way louder, you can feel it. It's much thicker and thumpier than it is in the verse. And yes, I said thicker and thumpier. So here's all I did. I grabbed a low end boosting plugin, just a plugin that's basically like an EQ that just boosts the lows. I went with this knob right here, boosted it up, hit it, went to the A here, which allows you to automate that knob. And then that shows up here. And then so I'm not using it at all during the verse. As soon as the chorus hits, boom, it comes flying up. And that's why that kick drum in the low end of the drums really punches much more than it does in the verse. Alright, that is it for the breakdown. I'm going to go ahead and play it from start to finish, and then immediately following that, I'm going to share what I think are the 2 things that this song does really well, and one thing that I think is kind of We'll talk about that, but here's the song from start to finish. Okay, 2 things I love about this song. Number 1 is the real acoustic drum sound. They're so well recorded and mixed, and in an age of increasingly electronic drums and loops-based drums, I just really appreciate the performance and the snare builds and the really cool fills that happen throughout the song. The drummer did a really good job of picking his spots, but making sure that he still exudes a lot of energy into his songs by implementing maybe more fills than an average song would, but it sounds really good, and we really need to bring back more of this drum sound to modern productions. I think it would be great for music, and I think people like this sound more than most producers tend to think, just based on their habits of using exclusively electronic and loops-based drums. And the second thing I really liked about this song is just the lyrical concept is amazing. Alright, let's just be honest here. Like, to take something as arbitrary and meaningless as cough syrup and turn it into a massive hit indie song is just fantastic. I love how the lyrics wrap up with, one more spoon of cough syrup now. It's just a cool line that just concludes the song really nicely. And what's powerful about this is you can literally taste the cough syrup. Like your brain, your body, you can feel like you're tasting the cough syrup. Just like if you're thinking about lemon juice. Like if you imagine yourself squeezing a lemon into your mouth, you can feel exactly what that feels like without actually doing it. And so that's the power of sense-bound writing, where you write from your senses and pull from your senses. Now, if you want to learn more about sense-bound writing, I highly recommend this book. It's called Popular Lyric Writing: 10 Steps to Effective Storytelling by Andrea Stope. This is a really good book that would help you write from your senses and make your lyrics less boring. This has been a really helpful book for me. And I'll leave an Amazon link in the description below if you want to check it out. And finally, the one thing that I think this song could do better is, honestly, I think it's just the vocal melody. I think it's a good, solid melody. For me though, it just gets kind of boring after a while. I think it could use a little bit more color, maybe by adding in a few more fours throughout the song. So I think what could be cool here is, so the last line, I waited for this cough syrup to calm down. Instead of that, it could be a little bit more along the lines of, I waited for this cough syrup to calm down, yeah. I think just a little bit more of a colorful melody would make this song even better in my opinion. But that's just me. The song obviously did perfectly fine in its own right. It's one of the most popular indie songs of all time. But I still think it's fun to think about, like, if you were to make this song better, what would you make better? I think it's a good mental exercise. Alright, that is it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video was helpful. And if it was, be sure to let me know in the comments which song you would like me to recreate in the future. You guys have an amazing rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.